So we ended up, this is real world, we ended up, this is consequences, we ended up, one of the groups that wrote was a group called Aid to Artisans, and it's Smithsonian associated, and we checked with our lawyers and we were able to send out a group mass email to say, if you want to help this guy, talk to these people, because that's what they do. They work with craftspeople all over the world, and they make sure that their work gets to market. And they adopted Abdul Wakil. They actually adopted him and ended up, I mean, in this case, they ended up taking a bunch of those potters to, this is like 3 years later, Uzbek potters to explore, shared traditions. And the town has really, really thrived because it was all potters. And of course, it's also safe in the north. And it makes sense, and it was the center of pottery. But you can, make that happen. I mean, you can't make that happen. All you can do is wonder, who was that? Where was everybody when the farmers needed help, or the first guy with his wall? But it was just this moment, a moment, and as I said, the sound on the radio was a little bit clearer, where people just poured in their concern and stuck with it too. We have one of our own, Sarah Chase. I don't know if she used to report for us. Reported out of almost a year out of Afghanistan, and then decided to leave journalism to open up a company in Kandahar, and it's called the Arand soap. And she makes soap. She has a group. There's only about 15 of them, but they support 50 people each. Women, many of them, and they make soap out of almonds and pomegranates and apricots. And in her view of things, this business is one small dent, because each one of them comes from a big compound of people in the poppy trade down there. And if there were 50 of these, there would be, these people can actually make pretty decent money, and they don't want to grow poppy, but they have nothing else to do. So when I was last in Kabul, which I've been, and 3 times, when I was last there, it was 2006, I expected to do very, very featurey stories about the 5th anniversary of after the war, even though there's a war going on. 6 months before, we made Long on the Planet, we ended up, the war speeded up, that we're now reading about all the time this last year. And so I went to see Sarah, and we used her manager as our translator. And he was another amazing person. He was 23, had 2 little babies, supported his whole family. And he also led us into all these kinds of areas that we wouldn't have been able to get into had we not been with him, and that people wouldn't have seen. And bear with me, because just tell the story really quick. There was a moment where we were driving out to where there had been huge fights between the Taliban and NATO. NATO had always won because they had firepower, but the Taliban at this point in time had reverted to something that had never existed a year and a half ago for all intents and purposes. And they borrowed it from Iraq, inspired, whatever. Suicide bombings. And even 2 weeks before we got there, even though it was calm, there were no more battles because the Taliban had pushed back, the Panjwai Bazaar, which was the center of this whole province, the Panjwai Bazaar was pretty dangerous, and 14 people had been killed in some 14 local people had been killed in their booths in the bazaar when a suicide bomber had come 3 weeks before. But Khair decided we could do it. He thought, he was up to it, and so we went out 2 or 3 times during this week and a half, and each time interviewed more and different people, and got a feel for the place, and got a feel for what their needs were, and put those stories on the air. But at one point, I'm standing with Khair, I'm standing with my producer, who I used to wear a veil. You can't go to Kandahar without a veil. You just cannot walk around. You already would stick out like it. Obviously, but I wore a veil, and I wore a shalwar kameez, which is only like, actually, loose clothing over my Levi's. But my producer didn't have that need, and so he was 6'2" and blonde and wearing khaki pants and looking every inch an American. Corn-fed, actually. And so we're standing out there chatting away to Afghanistan National Army guy, a colonel, and talking to him about what they could do there. And he's basically saying, we could be driven out in a minute. We don't have the firepower, we don't have the guns, we're not trained. The police aren't trained, and they were across the street. So, fairly safe, but sort of not really. And all of a sudden we hear this sort of rumble, and we look down, and up the street comes a convoy of what's known as labs, lightly armored vehicles. But they're, as I was saying, they're tanks. So each one had a gunner on top. And they roll up, and the first one looks over and sees the Gemini and sees me, Jim and me. And for some reason, I don't know why, it goes like this. NATO troops, Canadian. I'm like, hi. And then each one, so we wave back, we go, hello, I gave him a clean wave, hi. And, you know, this. And then each one, and it's the 9 of them about, each one rolls by, and each guy, gunner, fully, you know, looking like, you know, what everybody looks like with their full bulletproof vests and whatnot, waves and waves. And then the last guy, as he pulls up, for some reason, couldn't take it, couldn't believe it, looks down and he says, you don't stick out. You know, in the middle of where they wouldn't go outside a vehicle, where they couldn't go actually, they would be targets. And I never, but what had stuck with me at that moment of time was I thought, yeah, we do stick out, but we belong here. And if we do our job, this is where the stories are. And so, the whole point of going in is not to sort of blend in, not to know, but to actually go. You know, just go and connect and bring the stories back. And it doesn't matter if it's the homeless people in Vaughan that you've never, ever had a conversation with, or a village in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of Kandahar, that actually you couldn't go to today, as it happens. That, you know, that's the challenge, and that's the challenge to me of doing journalism, which is telling, indeed, these stories that are out there everywhere and just haven't been told yet, at least not until you get there. So thank you very much. That was, I'm sorry to take you.
Thank you very much, Renee.
Not that short.
Why don't I call up Ed and Charlotte Eslow now, and also Greg to the staff. We're wanting to present Renee with the 2008 Anvil of Freedom Award. This is what it looks like, so come on over here. And I'll bring Ed and Charlotte up here. As we had said before, this award is given to Renee in particular recognition of the work that she's done to contribute stories that better help us to understand a variety of contexts and help us to be informed citizens within our democracy. So congratulations, Renee, and thank you very much.
That we have been under the radar for so many years, in my experience, which dates back 20-some years, 28 years, and to actually, it's wonderful to be recognized. It's wonderful to be listened to, and it's wonderful to be recognized. So,
now, we're inviting students and anyone else who'd like to come upstairs to the Breslin room to have a little more informal time of question and answer with Renee. Also, at this time, you're welcome to sit in on the C-SPAN class that takes place upstairs in the Distance Learning Education room. There's a room set up next to it called the Seaman Room, where you'll be able to watch what's happening. It's a satellite course that takes place in a conversation between people at C-SPAN in Washington, D.C. and here at the University of Denver. So you're welcome to join that. George McGovern is the guest there. At this point, I'd just like to say thank you again to Renee, our speaker, and also to all of you for being here, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.